the biggest thing that I think I've learned here is not to go overly analytical, which has been some unlearning that I'm hoping that, Mike, you and I can probably share notes on is like,
Totally.
you don't need to go to the nth degree on some of the analytics side.
All right, welcome back to another episode of What Worked. After this short intro, you will get to meet our next guest, Saurabh Shah. He's the CEO of Warren James. Warren James is a company that builds businesses around creators in this creator economy. They're spearheading many different merch lines, product lines, and that sort of thing for some of the biggest creators in the world. Warren James is a really unique company, at least from our perspective, right, Tyler? They have to cater to many different stakeholders: the content creators, the creators' teams, like their managers and that sort of thing, the creators' audience, and then their own team, which is a global team that lives all around the world. And so we brought Saurabh on as the CEO of that company to help us think through how to manage a global remote team, how to build culture, and just the thing that we all deal with at work, which is managing different stakeholders. Did you have a moment or part of that conversation with Saurabh that you think the audience should tune into and pay special attention to?
I'll toss out a few key words that I like. First of all, Saurabh is my neighbor, technically. So we're from this. We both live in the same part of LA. So I refer to him as Sawtelle's finest. If you know Los Angeles, you'll know what I'm talking about. Great neighborhood. The other thing I'm going to toss out is the word or two words, same word together, moo. Okay, so we talk about one of his, partners, content creator partners, who ended up creating a very successful line of moo. If you don't know what those are, hit the old Google machine or Perplexity or ChatGPT or whatever your search engine of choice is. But yeah, to Mike's point, I found that conversation, obviously I enjoy all of them. This is our show, but I found it so stimulating because I myself, these days, I don't really watch any TV. I don't watch movies. I don't watch anything. I watch YouTube. So I am myself a consumer in this content creator space. And I, as a person that, owns their own business, I love the business side of content creation because it's quite interesting. These people build incredible distribution and incredible following, but they are very, very, very dependent on the platforms on which they're on in terms of they can get deplatformed, they can get demonetized, right? It's very, kind of flimsy at best. And that's where Saurabh's company comes in. Warren James is really cool in helping these creators basically diversify their income streams. But yes, this conversation, if you follow content creators or are even remotely interested in it and are someone that likes to dig into the business side, you're going to really enjoy it.
Check out the episode and let us know what you think. Welcome back to another episode of What Worked. Tyler and I are stoked to have an awesome guest here today. We have Saurabh Shah, the CEO of a company called Warren James that is working in this nebulous creator economy, at least nebulous to me and Tyler, who are still trying to figure out what's trending. We're super excited to have you, Saurabh. We were talking earlier, and we want to learn more about you, Warren James, and a little bit about how you kind of manage multiple stakeholders at Warren James. It's something that Tyler and I are always talking about at Higher Frame. How do we manage our different stakeholders that we're always trying to work for and serve? It's a challenge. It's a kind of work in progress always for us. And so we're eager to kind of hear your tips and tricks about what works at Warren James. So without further ado, Saurabh, can I turn it over to you? Could you introduce yourself to the audience and tell us more about Warren James and what you guys do there?
Yeah, for sure. I'll do the quick version of the background. So I've always been delving into stuff that kind of touches on both sides of my brain. So blending a lot of creative aspects and analytics into my career. And it feels like most careers end up being on one side or the other. And I feel like I've gotten a lot of happiness when blending both. Was a creative early in life, a magician at a young age. I was a member of the Magic Castle when I was 13, made a movie when I was in high school, but then pivoted to professional services post undergrad, Cornerstone Research, a litigation consulting firm, and then went to UCLA for business school. Post business school, was a partner at BCG, and that's where actually Mike, you and I ended up meeting, which was rad. I got to hire and work with you on a bunch of different projects too. So on the BCG side, I got lucky because I think we're being in LA, being able to work on like media and technology projects and a lot of stuff that kind of hit on the consumer front too. with the digital ventures arm of BCG, we were building startups for Fortune 500 companies. So that ended up making it a lot of fun on thinking about how do you actually think more of like a startup, but also have the backing of these larger companies to make that happen. Love the startup side. So that's when I left BCG, joined Next 10 Ventures. So that was a fun to build creator businesses. We were basically backing anybody who is a creator, so anybody that has largely long form content on either YouTube, Twitch. We would help fund anything that they wanted to bring to market. So with Chad and Be Quaint, we actually helped build like a toy subscription box, supported game ventures, supported actual technology items too. And I ended up meeting the co-founders of Warren James at that gig. So Ben Warren Widener and Kevin James Ramsey, they ended up coming to Next 10. We were using them for some merch aspects, and I became an advisor to them. So it was strictly in an advisor capacity for about 2 or 3 years before I joined full time. I still want to get more operational experience. So I joined Jono, which is a medical scrubs company. So Figs kind of is the big name brand, and then Jono was kind of the David and Goliath story there. And then Warren James got to such a size where like my background, so mixing both the creative and the analytical sides could help really scale the business. And we've done just that, right? So over the last 2.5 years, we've grown over 50%. We support really the biggest and coolest creators in the business. And it's just been an awesome ride. So that's kind of the background. Hope that sheds a little bit of light. And Magic Castle is always a fun topic. So if that ends up getting sprinkled into a couple of things, we'll do that too.
How often you've got a kid? How often do you make it to the Magic Castle these days? And I know you're in Hampton with me. Do you ever get
Yeah.
to go at late nights?
So funnily enough, dude, we did a Hampton event there at the
I
Magic
now
Castle.
I now I know who was probably behind it.
You got it. You got it. We're gonna hopefully do one in March too. So
Yeah,
you got to come to that one. Yeah, at this
I
point.
will in a
Uh,
heartbeat. That's awesome.
so I'm getting there every now and then. I actually just went Tuesday for a little early birthday celebration. It was great. And then I try to get there every like 6 or so months. I haven't performed there since I was like 20, 21 years old. So now I gotta make it a goal to try to get back there and hopefully do a week there too.
Without a doubt. One more personal question before Mike shifts gears, because I know Mike's chomping at the bit to jump into the business stuff. But I gotta ask any person who has a background in being a magician, I gotta ask, did that play any role in the sort of courtship of your wife, your partner?
Of of course, man. And
You got it right.
yeah, for a 1 year anniversary, dating anniversary, I done this thing because we didn't have money then, and like lit a string on fire, and it out came a necklace. And so for the proposal, I did the same thing, lit a piece of paper on fire, and out came the ring. So it's always a little special, to kind of blend that into.
Now she just thinks anytime you light something on fire, she's like, "Ooh, what's to come?" And you're like, "No,
What's
actually,
gonna be coming up? What's gonna be coming
I'm
up?
just starting a fire."
Yeah, it's good to blend some of that creative aspect into
You got
into the
to.
romantic life, right?
What a
So,
skill! I had no skill of any sort, so I'd just be like, "Let me make this beer
oh
disappear." That
come
was like
on.
my magic trick.
Mike, I feel like you're a creative though. I feel like you got some of that in you.
He
I
does. He
wish.
does.
I
I
wish. No, no, but
you,
I will say that sorry, you actually I think organized a trip. I maybe it was through
Yeah.
BCG, the first my first time at Magic Castle, and it really changed me. Like and I'm not just saying
wow.
that. Like
Really?
I like to think of myself as like a rational, logical person. So like magic is like, I'm the guy that's always like looking to try to find like the slip up and the tricks. I can call it out. We went there. I don't know if you were in the room. I think you were, but like there was a mentalist there that was like reading people's minds. What happened was is, like they did that to one of our colleagues,
Uh-huh.
and like so I knew it was like legit, and I was just like, whoa, like that is insane. Like I never thought that would happen. I always thought it was like fake on TV and stage plants in an audience. So
Yeah.
that was really
It's
cool.
not.
And then I still
Yeah.
don't know what to think. My brain is
Yeah.
like, no, it's fake. So, but yeah, I've never
Hater.
been the same since that night.
Sounds like a trip to the Magic Castle is in order with this
Let's
gang
do
here.
it.
So
Let's
Yeah.
we can
do
make
it.
that happen. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Going back to the probably the Warren James side, right? So I think we just started to touch on this. So our business is developing brands and premium merchandise for the world's biggest content creators. So Good Mythical Morning is a brand that we've worked with. Hassan Piker, who's kind of like more of a political commentator on Twitch. Brittany Broski has a bit of podcast and video stuff going on. Pay Money Wubby is a Twitch streamer that does a variety of content. Call Me Chris. She's really big on TikTok, probably 50 million or so on TikTok. So we basically create really cool products, stuff like what I'm wearing right now. And we want to help them diversify their revenue outside of just content. So
Mm.
Yeah.
extend their IP onto physical products. And we do apparel, toys. We've done comics, food and beverage. And basically, if you can kind of move it, we'll figure out a way to make it and make sure it gets over here to fans. Then our differentiator has really been around going beyond print on demand. So we don't want to do like basic screen printing. We really go above and beyond to do more custom cut and sew, apparel, plush, toys, like we talked about, to create something that feels truly unique to the audience and feels really unique for that creator as well.
Yeah, we've heard about some of the things. Could you share like one example, maybe of something you've done recently that you're really proud of that exemplifies like that premium kind of creative concept that you guys brought to life?
One that I've talked about and I really enjoyed the process with. So Brittany Broski, who I mentioned earlier, right? So really cool kind of like content around a little bit around podcasts. She has specific guests that come on. And she had actually come to us with the idea of developing a muumuu. And this is kind of a big nightgown. It's essentially like probably worn in the like 30s to 50s. Her grandma wore it. And she was like, hey, can we figure out a way to make this happen? And this is one where we were actually hesitant because of this like stakeholder kind of dynamic. We were like, who is gonna buy a muumuu for from a creator, right? Like who wears nightgowns on top of that? Who would end up buying one? And this is one where we went on a little bit on gut because Brittany was really thrilled about this idea and we knew that she'd actually promote it well, which is a majority of how we get success. And then two, we kind of started doing a little bit of focus group stuff around like, hey, if this is the product, would you think about it in placement of a robe? And we ended up launching it. So we took the one that she brought to us that was like 50 years old. We figured out a way to kind of make that happen in a few different colorways. So it had the same level of like texture, feel, zipper, all of that. It actually had the same resemblance as the one she had before. And we brought it to market in 3, 4 different colorways, and it sold like crazy. And I would not expect a product like this to take off as well as it did. And it just sold so well. And it's continued to do well. We brought it back in different colorways. We brought it back in around holidays. We're thinking about different patterns that are associated with it. So that one was one where it was just like more around gut feel with a little bit of focus group because she was so passionate about the product itself.
And so it sounds like going back to the idea of like the different stakeholders for Warren James, it's like to me it sounds like it's obviously the creators, one of your main stakeholders, if not the main stakeholder for you. There's their audiences, there's your team, which I imagine is doing it's like a creative like team of like do anything type people, like a fantasy factory of folks. Is that the right breakdown of who's in this picture and putting that formula together?
I would probably even put more into the mix, right? So you
I was
also
gonna
have
ask.
them,
Yeah.
yeah, you have the manager, the agent,
Right.
who is the one has brought the deal to us, right? And they're obviously going to be incentivized by making sure that their client is going to get paid and ends up getting the biggest check. So we have them kind of in the mix. And usually that person might be different. You might have an agent and you might also have a manager. The creators that we work with tend to be pretty large, and we're humbled to be doing that. But that also brings then they might have like a creative director, and that creative director is usually in the picture for thinking about the creative aspect too. So there ends up being just like a litany of folks that we're making sure that we help shepherd along. And the other people, of course, like the audience is going to be most important that we're developing for them and our team because they are dreamers. They do want to make cool stuff, and we've got to kind of figure out how to rein it in and make sure that they're developing towards the creator and towards the audience too.
Yeah, I know you've made reference to this, but you've talked about like kind of almost a proprietary formula to kind of, making sense of these different metrics. What's always interesting me about creators is when we've actually done this recently with the What Worked, podcast audience. But it's always interesting to look at, your audience demographics, because what you think, where they're coming from, and where they actually are coming from, and all that, their age, it might not match with what's inside your brain. So I'm just kind of curious, how do you approach that conversation with the creator, when they come to the table with some type of idea, and then you're marrying that with a bunch of other kind of like business, research information?
Yeah, it's an interesting problem because if you think about most platforms, they're technically only supposed to be for people who are over 13 or 18 years old. And so when you have data that comes back from a platform, including like third-party software that will do some of this, it's totally skewed, especially if the creator is appealing to an under 18 audience, which frankly most creators have a pretty large part of it. So whenever we talk to creators, they're like, "Oh, this is what my audience looks like," and we kind of look at that. We look at their content. And we're like, "This probably doesn't really match up." So we'll do our own surveying, and we'll poll. We'll be like, "Hey, just put this up for a poll." And we'll get back demographics, and that will be our guiding light on what this looks like. And in general, we see that it is usually younger, usually more international than what some of the data might say. And even some things like the male female breakdown, which is going to be critical for parts of this, will be very different than what third party data will have. So
Interesting.
it's been a game changer on how we approach it. So even out of the gate, before we're going to even sign a creator, we'll use this as a mechanism to say, let us understand what your audience looks like. And by the way, it kind of gives us a gauge of how many people have filled out the survey, and that helps us figure out how big the audience might be engaged as well. So that serves as another metric too. And that's really to your point on the stakeholder side, right? Like the creator usually thinks the audience looks more like them than anything else. I'm speaking in broad strokes. And we're like, hey, actually, no, they're much younger, or there might be more female leaning or things like that. It's a hard conversation to honestly have because you're like, no, well, hey, who I meet at the convention kind of looks like this. And like that could
Yeah,
be one it's a smaller sample size, but here's
sure.
data from 5,000 people that say otherwise too.
Yeah, you reminded me of a very funny, like, personal anecdote. I think Taylor Swift was in my top 5 of Spotify. You couldn't you couldn't pay me to go to a Taylor Swift concert. I honestly, I know there it's like a crazy ticket, and you're probably like, you're lying. Like, if I gave you, front row tickets, you'd go. Honestly, I have no desire to see her live, but apparently I love listening to her music. So I'm obviously like, I'm probably not showing up correctly on her demographics, in terms of, the fans that she meets versus apparently one of their true fans.
I thought you were going in a very different direction. I thought you were like, hey, your
Yeah.
kids are listening to,
Nope, it's
your
me.
Yeah,
It's
somebody
Spotify.
me.
hacked you.
Nope,
And
nope.
somebody
Didn't get
hacked
hacked.
you.
Believe me, I got my Spotify Wrapped, and I was like, "Come again?" I was like, "Top 5?" I'm like,
Wasn't there that one
I
guy,
yeah,
that Democratic
yeah.
senator who was like, oh, I got he published all Bruce Springsteen songs and it wasn't. He like it faked it. Spotify
No.
Wrapped.
I did not know about
No.
that.
I could totally see
It
that. That's
sounds
very
about right
funny.
though. Yeah, not
Yeah,
And he blamed
surprised
yeah,
it
by
because
something like that.
his kids
yeah.
were listening to Spotify or something like that. I was
Yeah.
like, that doesn't seem
Yeah.
right.
Yeah. He's like NBA young boy.
Yeah. How do you, I mean, you guys obviously aren't more consumer facing, but as you guys
Yeah.
try to like learn more about whether it's your customers or then who you're kind of hiring to, how are
Yeah.
you learning about that? Because you're just probably talking to leadership, I would assume for the
Yeah.
most part, but then you got to make
Yeah.
sure culture
Man,
jives with the rest of the company and all that as well, right?
Yeah,
it's a
one
wonderful
thing
question.
yeah, one thing that came to mind when you're describing how like you guys bring value to the table by doing like analysis, like survey analytics and that sort of thing to help bring insights to your creators. Maybe a parallel at higher frame is like a lot of our customers say like they're a head of sales of a software company or maybe they're the CFO of a software company. They always want to know, like a common question that we field is that we receive is like, hey, like what are other companies that look like us doing? How are they building their 2025 like finance organization? What does like a modern sales organization look like for a series A fintech? Like and then what does like the go to market motion look like, for example? Or like how are you like dividing up? How are you like building like a hybrid US Philippines based accounting team? Those are the types of questions that we see. And they want examples. And I think it's like very similar to sort of at BCG, like a lot of the clients at BCG, they got a lot of value because BCG has experience working like across industries and even within industries. So there's like a lot of examples. There's a lot of institutional knowledge around like how to and like what's best practice today. That is one thing like our customers are coming to us a lot for right
Yeah,
now.
Yeah, like
and
analog.
what I would add to that that's been really interesting. We're a service, whatever you kind of call it, professional service provider. And so we have the benefit of being able to. We've just set throughout the years. We basically have set goals. We're going to have conversations with the people that signed the contracts, made the decision to quote unquote hire frame, and gotten to know them. And to kind of bring it back full circle to Warren James, there's the people that this, whatever you want to call them in sales, would be the decision maker, person who decides to engage with higher frame as a partner. But then there's also this other sort of subsect of our customers, which is the day-to-day stakeholders, the people that are responsible for managing the talent that we're staffing for them. And I would say that those two profiles are very different. Typically we'll have a conversation with the decision maker. It might even just be one conversation, 30 minutes, and what they deeply care about, to Mike's point, is I would describe them as, they're either entrepreneurs or they're soon to be entrepreneurs. They think like executives that they're at a stage in their career, as well as, a role within the business where they treat it like it's their own business. And so they really do take that sort of thought leadership role, which is like, what should I be thinking about? And they value that expertise, and they want to know what other smart companies are doing and all that sort of stuff. And then if you switch to the day-to-day stakeholders for higher frame, it's very different. Oftentimes it's a manager who's getting their first opportunity at doing a business initiative like this. So they can kind of attach their name to cost savings for the business, growth for the business, whatever it might be. And for that person, it's a much more kind of like hand holding approach where they really want to know, hey, like, how can we work together? I'm trying to figure this out. I really want this to be successful too. So it's interesting. But those demographics, when you actually sit down and look at them on quote unquote on paper, I always find that you always come away with some incredible insight.
It's a good point because what we have in ours, right? So I wouldn't call what you guys are saying is like there's a conflict between call it the day-to-day manager and the decision maker, right? Usually they're going to be somewhat aligned, especially against some of these cost quality outcome pieces. Where we sometimes end up facing an issue is for a creator, they do obviously want the revenue that comes from the merchandise side, but it's usually call it somewhere around like 10 to 15% of their total take home pay, especially the bigger ones that we work with. And so they want to make sure that the merchandise is like pristine and perfect before they decide to put it out into the market. Whereas we try to do somewhere around 3 to 4 drops per year for any given creator. But sometimes what ends up happening, they're like, oh, well, I don't love the way that this puff print is exactly raised. So how, if we tried it a different way, what does that look like? So that'll delay launches. And then we have somebody like the agent manager who's like, hey, how come we haven't gotten to a launch? Because we want to end up getting the revenue. So that's where we actually see things that are, they're aligned with us in that sense because we want to try to get more launches out. And we have to help kind of guide. I think we're similar around this. Is like we're guiding each stakeholder towards an outcome that kind of makes sense. Because we also, for the creator, they need to be extremely happy with the outcome for them to promote it with like gusto, right? Like they need to be just ecstatic about this t-shirt is like the best freaking t-shirt you're gonna buy. And it's just the best quality. And here's like a really cool walkthrough of it. And that's where we see success is like the creator who've got the rack behind them. They do a walkthrough of the website. They feel like super pumped about every step of the way. So that's where we've seen the most success. And so it's trying to like marry that with, okay, well, what does potentially the age management want? What do we want? And trying to guide them towards that outcome too.
I'm chuckling to myself, and this is no knock on them because obviously they're a wildly successful business. But when you say the gusto, I'm thinking of just how, just about every creator I feel like is working with AG1. And so I think about, I've seen probably a very wide range of AG1, ads, everything from like, hey
Yeah.
guys, what's up? Every day I like to take my AG1 supplements. It's really great, to someone being like, I'm feeling strong. I'm feeling fit. I needed greens in my life, And so you're absolutely right. I can always tell when I have a creator that I follow, when they're behind something, you can feel it. And you're like, and I've been sold on stuff before. I have one question. I know Mike wants to jump in, but I'm just really curious about one particular aspect of sort of the process about you in particular, Sora, because I see this with Mike and my wife. Also, I don't know if you knew this. My wife is a consultant at Deloitte, and I call it the consultant superpower, which is it's that ability to understand either an entire, call it like industry, type of business, model, whatever it is. It's that ability to seek out the right information, digest it, and then very quickly understand it. I try to think about how do you feel like you apply that to your day to day? Because I'm thinking about someone. I know you have that great example of that guy, that rip dude, William Tennyson, I think is his name,
Yeah,
or the
yeah, yeah.
creator, right? And you guys did the baked goods, and so how do you become an expert on baked goods overnight?
It's great. We have great people around us. That's kind of the first piece of this, right? So we hired two awesome women who ended up leading, who led our food and beverage side of things. So they are amazing on figuring out how to think about what products to go after. So I think that's obviously going to be step one. The biggest thing that I think I've learned here is not to go overly analytical, which has been some unlearning that I'm hoping that, Mike, you and I can probably share notes on is like,
Totally.
you don't need to go to the nth degree on some of the analytics side.
Yeah.
So you don't need to be, and that's where we felt like we had to potentially get. I think the better part about this, especially with our traditional merch versus the food and beverage side, has been for the most part, as long as it's an e-commerce good, it generally follows the same kind of analytics and what kind of margins and whatnot you're looking for. So that part's the easy part. But honestly speaking, like the food and beverage side, super hard. Where we did this cereal with Good Mythical Morning, and to do that development took a very long time. It's a very different process than coming out with a shirt, where we were making a custom shape, we're making a custom flavor, and so that just took substantial time. And it is very much about like diving into the deep end, making sure that you're having conversations with the co-manufacturer, doing it frequently, understanding pros, cons about different ingredients, how things are molded, shaped. So it is very much just like, I think diving into the deep end for like at least a week and just being like, all right, how am I going to really figure this out? And then you can kind of come up for air and then trust the people that are around us to make that happen. And that's been a really great learning. I luckily had the advantage of being an advisor for like 2+ years for the business. So I could really hit the ground running and we're able to make a bunch of improvements on like process, margins, and all that kind of stuff. So that was great. Um, what you mentioned earlier that kind of struck me around the products that you're going to developing for for the audience, or even like something like the AG1 side, right? That is very much a metric that we use around like how are they promoting their brand deals? And that will give us an indication on how they're going to promote merch deals. Because if the,
Interesting.
if they're doing AG1 in that first tone that you were talking about, that's
Yeah,
probably not going to fly. That's probably having to pitch their t-shirt. So it'll
totally.
usually be a subjective factor that we put into our model for even if we want to work with that creator too.
Super, super interesting. And that diving deep thing that resonates with Mike and I love to do that, about just everything. So we can appreciate that. The value in just immersing yourself in all the information and just trying to come up to air, kind of say like, what did I learn?
Absolutely ends up being the case. And that's where it's good to like, even for me to like look specifically at like the survey responses, let me get familiar with it and understand what this is about so that I can kind of get my head around that. So especially as entrepreneurs, you guys are like right. This is founder manager mode, right? Is that what
Yep.
it is? Founder manager mode.
Yeah. Yep.
Founder mode. Founder mode.
Founder
Founder
mode
mode
versus
versus I think
Urgh.
I think manager mode. I think manager mode, that was the gist of it, right? It was like middle managers basically are kind of the death of startups, basically. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So that's always a good model to think about, because I think you end up like going into founder mode and like really diving deep versus at some points, hopefully letting people actually do their work with the right leadership team that you've hired. So that's always ends up being a struggle on a day-to-day basis. Even though I'm not one of the founders, I still have that mentality around it. being a hired gun too.
I'm curious now, sort of, one, you work with a bunch of creators, and like, I guess as a consumer of content, like, I don't often think about like the business of a creator, and you kind of alluded to like what some of your creators, like their teams look like, their business looks like in terms of like they have a business manager, they might have a creative director or something like that. Like, what does like that team or staff look like now? Like, we're always interested in like what teams look like for different types of organizations here at Higher Frame. So yeah, today maybe we can this is like a nice transition to kind of the where the creator economy is going and some things you're saying. But maybe we can start off by just talking about what does the team of a creator look like today, who's on that team, and maybe even for anyone who's interested in kind of joining the industry, like what are some like gaps, talent gaps, all right, for that creators might need to fill. There might be a shortage of that kind of talent. We're always interested in that kind of stuff.
Yeah, for sure. I'll make a pitch for a friend's business within this too. So I think there's all the way that is like extremely professionalized, right? So something like Mythical, which puts out content every day and has been in the business for probably 15 plus years at this point. They're OG YouTube creators and they have a full studio. They have a team of hundreds of people. They really have a professional organization that would rival, if not beat, even some levels of studios or people who are doing professional TV shows. So there's like that end of it down to what I would say is most of the creators that we have some level of like manager or agent. So that is usually the folks that are doing brand deals, helping to execute the brand deals. That's a majority of that side, but they're also helping with stuff like merchandising. Are there other business ties, other partnerships to be having too? Then depending on the kind of content the person has, it'll be a litany of folks within the content side. So it might be like video editors, producers, things like that. So, and much more around the creative front, down to also like moderators. If you're doing a Twitch stream, making sure that you have
Mm-hmm.
moderators that are
Mm,
within your Twitch stream, that they have folks around too. And then for stuff like if they have creative ventures, if they're an animated channel, that might be opening up a different team of folks. And what I was mentioning about my friend's business, so Sherry Wong, she has a business called Roster, and that is basically one where if you are a creator and you're looking for somebody, it'll be kind of the LinkedIn place to go and do that.
Oh, that's
And you as a
cool.
creator,
very
it's
cool.
super cool. And you can see like, oh, I can see like PewDiePie, who was his
Mm-hmm.
video editor, who is his thumbnail artist. And
Interesting.
based on that, be like, oh, I want to try to hire that same person because I feel like that could be really advantageous for my type of content too. So it really provides that level of transparency around like big creators or not and the types of people that they work with. And it's great. I mean, the business continue to do really well. So check it out. And it's very much geared towards the creator business because it's always that question, hey, who's your editor? Like, oh, this looks really good. How did you find that person? And provides a much more streamlined way of finding that person too.
Yeah, we hear video editors are high in demand these days.
It's quickly become one of the most I would say it probably accounts for about 40% of our recs at higher frame,
Yeah.
Mhm.
which honestly, Mike and I had no idea this would be a thing, but it's in such high demand, and us being a remote
Oh,
staffing
very cool.
company. Yeah, and we'll
Video
talk
editors
to
specifically.
Mhm.
specifically short form. So yeah,
Incredible.
so we work with a number of different media companies. Yeah, this need. What's really interesting is we're talking to a lot of these media companies, and they've just been telling us how quickly things are changing, and it's really hard to one find the talent, which I'm sure this is probably something creators struggle with too, right? And then two, it's expensive. It's a lot of people are still figuring out um streaming, or they're figuring out YouTube and all that stuff, and so putting together like the production people that they need can be hard in the US, so they're looking elsewhere. I have one last question on my end. You've been, let's call it, in the room. I like to use that expression. You've been in the room with, I imagine, a wide range of, call it, business people, everyone from probably Fortune 100 companies, from your time at BCG to obviously creators. And you even mentioned working at it was like a litigation research company, right? So litigators. What would you say has been the most surprising thing in working with creators, just in terms of the way they do business? What did you expect, and what have you learned?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think that also speaks to Mike, what you were asking earlier is like what the future of kind of the creator economy is going to go towards as well. I think the most surprising part about this has been the wide range of business know-how that I'm seeing, where I will be talking to like 18-year-old creators, and their level of business intelligence will be extremely high on just like, hey, would you think about this analytics? And because they're so steeped on the YouTube side, on thinking about deep analytics about like, how do I really maximize my audience? They'll be able to translate that into the business front. And that I honestly found surprising. I thought like we would have to help on wear that hat. And I'm able to learn from them as much as we're able to impart wisdom upon them too. So they're very much on the creative front. So the pendulum will also swing and be like, I'm here to make great content. I don't want to see anything. I don't want to see a number unless it's a check, right? So that's where we have to figure out, speaking on the first topic we were talking about on the stakeholder management side of like, how do you cater what you are displaying? Like it can't be a one size fits all. We can't be doing QBR style reports for all creators. So we got
Sure.
to see
Like, why are you
how we
Noted.
giving
kind of
this to
manage
me?
that.
Taking
Yeah,
notes
noted.
here.
Yeah.
And
That's
Yeah.
something
that's
I
where I
would
think
try. That's something I would have tried though.
I still am. I still am. Right. I just got an email on give me some year end reports on our creators. I was like, got you. Got that.
Yeah. You're saying to some 14-year-old, like, can we circle back on this? They're like, circle back? Like, what are you, what is that?
But that's where the future is going. Like, right, is the most popular career for people under 16. Right, is that they want to be a content creator, and you're going to continue to see the democratization of that content, and you're going to see everybody wanting to be one. And that's where I think it's actually kind of cool. You guys are tapped in. Yeah, you've got big companies, but people who are just like starting up on YouTube are thinking about how they get great edits going. And if you don't really have a content strategy, you're going to be DOA for most companies. If you don't have a creator or an influencer strategy, you're probably going to be DOA. So that's why probably AG1 has every single person pushing their
Yeah,
product
yeah, yeah.
because it
Props to the.
works.
By the way, AG1, I'd love to work with you. You hire frame.
Yeah.
Listen, whatever you need, AG1, I will call up these creators and I will yell at them if they do not give the most impassioned, plug possible. But yeah, no, that makes sense. And I think no, the interesting one for us is that we've worked with a lot of actually, I would say like more legacy media that's trying to get more, sort of prolific on the different
On
platforms,
social
and
and yeah.
they're trying to catch up with these 14-year-olds. I think if you can,
Totally.
so yeah, it's quite
Those guys run
interesting.
circles. Those guys run
Yeah,
circles, and they end
without a
up
doubt.
usually. I mean, this is again broad strokes. Like I feel like they end up having such a traditional media way of thinking about it, and like you've got to actually think about this from the lens of a creator or an influencer who knows how to put out content. And they usually are just like, oh well, can't I just make a 10-second video and hope that it does well? So I'm glad you guys are helping kind of point them in the right direction too.
That might be a perfect place to end it. I was going to just ask, I'd love to plug Warren James here. I know you guys have grown a ton. And maybe we could even put it out into the universe. Are there any creators that you'd love to work with that you haven't had a chance to? Just toss out your like dream five if you want.
I won't say it because I think we've got enough out there right now. We've got
Okay.
enough kind of like
Yeah,
tentacles that are in
cool.
motion, but
They're
we've
coming to
got a
you
bunch.
now.
I hope so. I hope
Yeah.
so. I hope that's where it's going to rebound kind of back to at this point. But we're blessed to be working with the ones that we currently are. We're expanding into really cool types of content. We work with now Dropout, which has an awesome SVOD platform. It used to be known as College Humor. So we run their merch program, Hell of a Boss, which is an animated channel. So our definition of creator, I think, is also starting to expand here too. It's not just, the strict uh, YouTube vlogger or like the Twitch streamer. And so we're seeing cool expansion around that too. We're tapping a little bit into the music space. So don't think of the very narrow definition, but there are ones that we should be working with. Please be emailing me at sorab@warrenjames.org or add me on LinkedIn. Would love to stay connected with the audience here too.
Very
There
cool.
you have
Well,
it. Reach
there you
out.
have it. Reach out to Sora, work with Warren James. Thank you so much for coming on to What Work. I'm sure I'll say this: you are probably the coolest person to come on What Worked. So, coolest by
Oh,
proxy. We're
shucks.
all dads here, so we're kind of lame. But
Yeah, the bar kind of gets automatically lowered there.
yeah, exactly. I saw Mike earlier today. I was definitely rocking my what are those Nike? Those my Air Monarchs, my dad shoes. So I'm not that cool. But yeah, we appreciate Saurabh, and
Thanks for
definitely
doing this.
we'll
Thank you
look out for the
guys. Thanks for
next
having me.
Moo Moo creation. Thank you.
Oh, you got it.